Good afternoon, Yorick.
Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon.
How's it going today?
So far, so good. Just started.
Just started. Slacker.
No, started 30 minutes ago, but just caught up with email to-do list.
I haven't even opened my email yet. Thanks. Hey, Giannis.
Hey,
Hey, Giannis.
Fabian.
Hello.
All right, we are past time to start. So I will start with the first topic there. So in Slack, there were requests for an embedded SRE person. And I was hoping Christopher or maybe Jerry would show up, but I will follow up with them offline and ask for that. Jerry's been joining the Sharding working group. He's been providing some expertise for us, right? But I don't think he's going to be the one that's the embedded stable counterpart for us. So yeah, I'll just follow up on that and see who and when we can get someone.
Well, that sounds good. Oh, Chun.
Go ahead, Fabian.
No, like I think it would be great to have someone, but I think we also need to be mindful that the infrastructure department is swamped with probably 500 competing priorities. And so I think one thing that I will try to review is, are there a few things that we can do ourselves already, just to like help them a little bit? For example, I think we know that we need security approval for people to look at production data. I'm sure there's a process somewhere. Maybe we can do that ourselves, right? And like that kind of stuff, because I think that would help and be collaborative. But I do think that it would be nicer to have someone in the team that can help us work with this, rather than having to write a project plan and say like, this is the specifications of everything we need, and somebody who has some time and capacity to support that would be great.
Yep.
yes, like example, like from today, like we were discussing with Dylan, like how we can fail our migration, and we're clearly missing like the details, like how things do run in the production. I think we know now, but like these things could be like pretty well answered and like modeled maybe with someone from the SRE team to help answer that, or like model that, or try that, or like see how we could translate that into like concrete steps, because like now we have some general ideas like how to do it, but we don't fully know yet what's gonna actually work and like how it would be executed. So someone familiarized with our processes on the infrastructure side would actually be very like needed to streamline these things and plan them ahead of the time.
So it sounded like there are demand. Actually, it will benefit both teams. For us, we get the knowledge we don't have on the production environment, so they can fill in the hole and help us to get those production related tasks articulated and done together. I mean, the teams will collaborate. And for the infrastructure team, there are also benefits that they know why the decision and how we come to those conclusions. So that when in the future is passed to production, they have full context how this was developed, and they know how to, also they get a warm up to monitor and host this environment, starting working with us.
It's actually even more complex. Like preparing infrastructure side of the stuff is like multi-month process for them. Like preparing for the migration, it means like running 5 or 6 different shards or like I don't know how many of that. And we're not gonna do it alone. And now like if we just prepare like a beautiful waterfall plan for next 6 months, they will simply say, hey, but we are not doing it like that. We need to do it differently, and we kind of delay that by another 6 months for this to happen. This is why we need someone working concurrently with us on these problems, like the migration, provisioning of these databases concurrently, to translate that into terminology, issues, and planning of the infrastructure steps on the other side. Otherwise, we're gonna run in the situation that like we did development changes, but we are another half a year or like 1 year from actually like running that because infrastructure wants to do things differently.
Yeah. So
and
also
to add to this, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, yeah, so project timeline wise, this will unblock us. I mean, will not slow down to ensure that we are not slowed down. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Fabian.
No, I agree with Camille, and just recalling the like Geo, the 2 failed attempts of enabling Geo in production. It's like the first time it took super long because we didn't have buy-in from infrastructure. The second time we actually had Henry and Scarback like there all the time, and they could actually log on to production and check things, and they knew how all of the chef things were configured and that kind of stuff. And that was extremely valuable. And I think what would be important is to be clear on when we would need such a person the latest, right? Because, if we need that now, I'm sure we'll make a few folks scramble to find that. If we need it in 6 weeks, it's probably a lot easier. I think that is something that I would like to understand.
Yeah, so I'll get an issue going and copy folks on it, and we get Brent involved, and he can start figuring out who is best to help support us, and ask for someone to start joining as soon as they can, right? So they can get up to speed. Maybe their involvement is nothing other than observing the meeting, so they can kind of understand the big picture, and slowly ramp up on the amount of time that they spend with the Sharding group. So
fortunately we have Yorick in this like initial period. He knows a lot of stuff, how it was running a long time ago. So I think we're gonna be fine with knowledge so far. But I think in like the long term, like someone doing things right now on the infrastructure would be really helpful. So I think like this 6 weeks is like I guess like it's like the max. But during these 6 weeks, I think we can handle the coming questions ourselves.
okay, so 6 weeks, that roughly aligns with the start of 14.2 then, right? So that's kind of the deadline, the last minute where we would like to get someone from SRE involved and identified as a stable counterpart. Is that correct?
Do you have anything to add? Yes, it's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and bullet point number 2, Tong requested, and I agreed, I already have the MR out there for it, to remove the working agreement for due date and confidence level. That was mostly for getting the POCs off the ground so we could decide a direction. So I agree, and it's not been asked for, so clearly not providing any more value at this point in time. So the MR is out there to remove it, and it will be gone today. Camille, you've got number 3.
Yes, I had this moment yesterday that like I kind of got to the point that I wanted to gather my thoughts about like different initiatives, especially like the outcome of the EORIC investigation of like the bloating, to kind of like catch like the whole direction of like how we can scale database in steps, which is like beyond what even we are doing with the decomposition, and what should be before and what should be after. It's actually like I started writing that after like discussion with different people and like their perception. But in general, this is like that, I guess like from what I see, like the bloating is like essential piece to understand why we are doing that first. The composition is like something that is inevitable for the majority of the features at some point. But like it's probably the thing that I'm kind of seeing, that like once you do the composition, like it's probably very easy to get to the partitioning next, because you already like decomposed you break a lot of cycles, you uncovered inefficiencies and things like that. So you're kind of on the wave to fixing like a lot of structural problems long term. But really like the sharding or like microservices is like a last piece. I think my perception right now is like that we still have like a lot of the bloating to do, and we didn't even like plan properly what to tackle. Especially one thing that I'm kind of seeing is like across teams is like we trying to retain like the status quo. We don't question why we keep data. We don't question the structures being used. We don't question like, is this actually feature needed, and for how long is needed. I think we could achieve like significant headroom just by questioning decisions made in the past if they actually made sense, because it's kind of like quickly changing with the growing application, like the iterations that we are taking. So I would actually propose like the kind of direction of like looking at the bloating like as a more like wide effort. If we are right now looking at the CI, we just focus on the bloating as much of the CI as it's possible right now before we decompose that, to actually build like this headroom for being able to efficiently execute partitioning later. Because right now my worry with the partitioning is like, if you tackle like big tables, it's gonna affect like a lot of things. And we currently don't have any tooling that would actually allow us this to confidently ship on the production in a way that we can actually like try like different schemas for the partitioning, or like pick the right one, pick like the best one. Because right now, like even like with the migration, partitioning, getting to the partition schema is like a multi-month effort, and like it's easy to get it wrong. It's easy to break like a lot of aspects of the application that's gonna be less performant, but it's kind of like decision made, and there is no really like a easy way to turn back on that. So I think my perception is like, yes, partitioning is needed, but it should be like in the order that we can actually figure out the best partitioning scheme. So like not rushing that heavily. I mean, we definitely have like a lot of easy cases for the partitioning that we can execute today. That like they are pretty, I guess, straightforward. Build trace sections, time decay pattern. I think something that like we discussed yesterday with Andreas, and like it's clearly something that we could basically like keep like 3 months worth of data and like don't care about anything about that anymore. But like there are more of these kind of tables, but this is like easy case, but it doesn't like the harder cases like CI builds. I think that like we don't have idea exactly like how to partition that yet, and like we are pretty far away from even like having the idea how to partition that, because like partitioning by the hashing function, it's not the greatest. Partitioning by time decay has its own drawbacks. partitioning by something different has even different drawbacks. So I'm kind of thinking right now that like the best is really like solve what we know right now, and we know that like we can debloat, we know that we can decompose, we know that it will give us like a lot of headroom, and then like we could really try different partitioning schemes because we have that headroom available for scaling. Otherwise, I'm kind of like worried like that we may end up with something done, but not really like better than it is now, or like put it differently, suboptimal.
So I totally agree with you. And it's something that the database group identified a while back as like, hey, at some point in time, we should really look at the architecture of our database to see if we are doing things correctly, where we can optimize, et cetera. And we've just never had the time or the bandwidth to do so. So I'm fully in support of doing this. I just had a question about order of operations. So if we're using CI as the example, in what order would we do the decompose, debloat, partition? And would it be in that order, or is there a different order or expectation?
I'm not particularly like attached to the order. I think there is always like some kind of wiggle room. I'm just kind of saying that like in ideal world, this would be my preferred order of doing stuff. We are not living in the ideal world, so I guess like we pick what we know and like what we can do right now. But like even like let's say if we squeeze like the debloating on the CI, we still have some time to do the debloating of the things that are known to us today before we actually like jump into the composition. So it's not that we cannot squeeze some debloating today. It's maybe not gonna be that comprehensive, or maybe it shouldn't be even like that comprehensive how you would approach that otherwise. But I'm not in particularly attached like very strongly to the order, but in ideal world, I think this would be like my preferred progression of like scaling the features. Like partitioning is really like very far away into like scaling. I know like that usually like what you want to apply the best practices, you know, at the given moment, and like this we should do it. But it's also hard to apply that for existing data because it's really usually like very long effort to do it. So we need to figure out some way like to execute that for existing features. So I'm kind of thinking that like some of these steps would be basically unified for the new features because you would assume that you know of that, but it's very likely that in a few years from now you would still like reiterate on that pattern, right? But like you still like, because like I'm kind of thinking like even database structure, like you keep adding new columns, you keep adding new structures. After some time, it's gonna be bloated anyway, because you added so many new features in the suboptimal way. So the bloating will have to happen at some point. The question is like, how important is it becoming? I think right now we are in this phase that we have so many bloated features that we are kind of overwhelmed with that alone. That kind of puts like a lot of emphasis on the phase number one.
Yep. Okay, no, that makes sense. No, thank you.
Yeah, but maybe I missed something here, but if I understood you, Camille, correctly, like for me, it was never the case that we would only do decomposition, and that was always clear that we would have to do multiple things, and to increase our sort of scalability, and that it depends probably a little bit on what kind of feature you're looking at, what you can do first, and how impactful that is, right? And I think for CI, for example, we, correct me if I'm wrong, we believe that decomposition is the one of the top strategies to address this, but we looked at merge request or like the logs, webhook logs, right? We didn't need to decompose that. We just did something else and was also efficient, right? So I think it's a little bit of a look at this and then decide what the right order of operation is and what to do, but it's likely not going to be just a single thing.
Let me challenge that. Let's say like we order stuff. the composition of the webhook logs is still on the table. We should not like be like that. It's still gonna grow significantly in the data storage over time. Just because like we moved that problem away right now because of the easy data structure, it's still like significant amount of the data storage used by our database in our database. So archives type of the storage, you kind of
But
move
that
the
is what I said. Where it's like it's likely
but
going to be more than one thing. Where it's like the how you order this depends maybe a little bit, but it was never one single silver bullet for everything, at least in my mind.
no, I fully agree. The thing is like keeping the steam, because like one thing that I'm kind of seeing like this happening very often, like we just do one thing, but we don't follow up on another essential thing that we know that this is essential at this point. I'm kind of like started writing that to make it explicit that these are the steps that if you want to like to get to the comfortable state, you just need to execute as many of these steps as possible, depending on the majority of your category, right? And now you can evaluate each of the feature based on that, right? Now, like you look at the CI, we do the bloating, the composition. Now, if we stop at the decomposition, we'll simply quickly run into problems again if we don't do partitioning. But like logs, they are already partitioned. They, to some extent, are already like debloated because of the way how they are stored. We may execute on the decomposition to make it easier. But now, like another example, like let's consider that we do webhook logs. We do the composition of the webhook logs because of the time decay pattern by not migrating data at all. We just start writing to the new database. You kind of like making the composition significantly easier to execute, because as part of the decomposition, a lot of effort is really like into migration to happen. So yes, like this, it's kind of flexible. It's like the ideal world. We are not living in the ideal world. The thing is like, this is like the steps to get into comfortable state. So you could probably like look at each of the feature category through these steps and see like how much you are in the comfortable state based on the scalability of this each feature, and then figure out which one is the more important.
I think what immediately comes to mind is that I don't want to do all of that work by myself, right? As in, you know, a single group responsible for doing this. So I think the question will also become, how can we fan out this in a way where, you know, there's maybe a matrix that says, you know, CI right now is the like worst offender, right? These are the strategies. Here are the tools for the teams to address this. We are there for supporting, but please go ahead and do this, right? And then for whatever else, next category, something similar, right? Because I think then there is maybe some ability to fan out that kind of work. I think the blueprints will also be helpful because new features should be designed with all of those considerations in mind by now, right? And I'm not sure they always are, but that's just my lack of knowledge.
My perception is like, it's impossible for like even like providing guidance, like how to decompose and partition features, because we don't know exactly how we want this to look like. We don't know that in like 9 months from now, once we complete this project, what we really know now, we know that we can debloat, and this is something that we should push, because this alone will take a lot of effort and time for teams to execute upon. And then like the next steps comes, which is like, I don't know, maybe the composition, maybe partitioning, you pick the right one. Maybe we will be finding the partitioning within the single database. But there is also like the trickiness, how you want to roll out that. But I guess like these are the implementation details that we need to go through and figure out how to best approach. And we are very far away from that yet. What we kind of know, like, is really like, we know that we can do the bloating to some extent. This is now, we have data, we see that we can break some of that. We know that on some tables we can run partitioning because of the data there. So there are a bunch of the things that we could probably kind of like spread out today alongside the decomposition effort on the particular feature, but only like in about few months we will have more details like how it could be executed by other teams.
All right. I've already reduced this meeting to 30 minutes. It was previously scheduled to an hour. So any other topics folks want to cover today? All right, I'll take that as a no. Thanks, everybody.